Alrighty, hello everybody, welcome in. Got a bunch of people joining in here again on another episode here of 3 Up, 3 Down, still on our same topic, which is on interference here in Season 4 of our rules study. We've talked about a couple different segments of interference, started on this journey here with umpires interference. DJ and Seth took you through that one. Last week was all about interference on the batter, specifically on the batter's ability to affect or interfere with the catcher's fielder or throwing. And this week we'll kind of focus a little bit more on the batter runner. I'll talk a little bit more about that in my preview here as well. A couple announcements here for me before we go ahead and hit the ground running. Many of you guys hit the field this week. Eric, you were talking about it. Steve, you said you're on the field here this tonight too. And I talked to a lot of people as well. My question is just, what exactly are you working on? And Eric was talking about proper use of eyes, which is one of our focal points. And if you're looking for some resources to help you out on some things to be mindful of as you're working, DJ just shared this in the chat, and that is the 2021 focal points here that we issued about a week or two ago from the Central Region Umpire Advisory Committee, and you can take those however you want. So feel free to pick and choose with those. Just think about what exactly you want to work on, be intentional, and obviously just get better and patient with yourself as we all get back acclimated to the diamond. The other thing, too, that we also sent out last week was a rules quiz. There were 6 questions over interference on the batter and the batters affecting the catcher's fielder or throwing. We'll eventually have an answer key out to that one. DJ's linking that one again in the chat. So if you guys want to go ahead and take a look at that one or save it, you can go ahead and get that one too. My goal on those answer keys is to get a collaborative effort between people of different regions together, like on a Zoom call, and probably go through each of those situations and then afford you guys the answer, and then we'll have a commentary to put out too that you guys can read through as well. But we'll have another one coming up later today, and I'll have DJ link the second one to the rules quiz in the chat later on today as well. Last 2 announcements for me then. Rules trainings videos from the Western region. Remember, Gary Groutman put out several of those together, and as you guys put together your clinics and what they may look like here in the future, I think Gary Groutman's stuff is great. There's a website that the Western region puts together in which you can find all those. DJ will link those here too to go ahead and use to not only help yourself get right for the season, but also then offer some training if you'd like to people in which you lead. Gone through the Mastering the Rules document too. DJ can drop that one in there as well, so that we all have at least some place to go to. And then lastly, remember that we still have a bunch of webinars that are out there on the umpire registry. Those are all recorded, obviously, for you to use at later reference, but if you can attend those live, that you have those opportunities as well. So take a look at those things here. And again, as many of you guys get back onto the diamond here this week, next week, or whenever the case may be, just be intentional and pick 1 or 2 things from your focal points list to think about, to work on, whether it's proper use of eyes, chest to ball, or just getting back to the basics. I think you'll find a lot of those things be highlighted here in our conversation today. Before I go ahead and get further on, anything I missed, DJ, Seth, or anybody else announcement-wise here before we go ahead and get into content for us today? Questions or anything like that?
All good, all good.
All righty. So then let's go ahead and dive right on in. And what I'm going to do is once again use the chat. So I'm going to share my screen here with you guys. And what I want to do is, first of all, review a little bit about what we looked at last week, which was obviously our topic on interference. And this week, we're going to talk even more about interference. Now, specifically this week, it is on the batter runner. So that'll take us realistically into 3 different categories. Number 1, the runner's lane interference, and that's where we'll kind of start. So runner's lane interference is one of those categories we'll focus on today. The same will be true then for the runner on his way, batter runner on his or her way to first base. So that's batter runner interference, failing to avoid a fielder that's making a play. And if we can get to it, catcher's interference. So those 3 categories are our scope for us today on 3 Up, 3 Down. Again, runner's lane violation, which is where we'll start. Interference on the batter runner on his or her way to first base. And if we can, we'll circle back then to catcher's interference as well. Now, I've thrown around the word here, interference, quite a bit. So let's go ahead here and see if we can go back to what we started with last week. And that was recalling then here what exactly we have to have for interference. So if you would, drop this stuff back in the chat here. The guiding principles, basic principles of interference. Try and answer these questions with some of your ideas in the chat. Refresh what exactly we talked about last week. What do we have to call interference? Think about some of the words, the criteria we may use to describe interference. Think about those things. Think about other different elements here that you would witness in a play that would give you an inclination here that we may or may not have interference. So go ahead and populate or answer in the chat here if you would, please. Really just answering these questions. Number one, what are the basic principles of interference? Kind of recall and refresh on that from last week. And what do we have to have interference? And you can go ahead and throw some of those answers from what you recall then into the chat here now.
All right, Stu, it's coming through here. We got a couple guys. Hinder, impede, or confuse the defense. Hinder, impede, hinder, confuse, or obstruct. What Mark said. Yeah, that's general consensus right now.
Good. So those words are fantastic. Hinder, impede, obstruct. Those are all then definitely good words here for the criteria of the rule. And remember our basic principles here from that. Now that's the action. Hinder, impede, obstruct. But even some more guiding principles here. Remember, contact is not always necessary for interference. So you do not need contact to have interference. But by the same token, just because there is contact does not mean that there is always interference. Remember, intent doesn't always have to be a factor in for it as well, so you don't always have to have intent. That's specific here, and we'll talk about that throughout the course then of this season on interference. And then lastly, when all else fails, revert back to common sense. And as we talked about, one of our focal points for 2021 is proper use of eyes. So really then keying on the usage of our eyes to be able to see and ultimately narrate what exactly we see is going to be really important for us to employ not only what we know about interference, but ultimately common sense or the long end of the stick. We do not want to take the short end of the stick. Here's a look at some of that criteria that we went through, and many of you guys went ahead and threw that up. That is great. You see all those words. Good work there. Interferes with, obstructs, impedes, hinders, or confuses. All of those actions then done by the offense in our conversation today would be considered as interference. And you guys did a great job of throwing that into the chat here as a reminder. Now, the last thing here to go ahead and refresh our memory on is that for the most part in our rule set here for Little League Baseball, offensive interference often uses time of interference for the placement of other runners. I'll repeat that. It uses time of interference often for the placement of runners unless otherwise provided. And that's going to be key here, not only in the situations from the rules quiz of last week, the situations that we'll see here that we'll present today as well. So just keep that in mind. And that is a little bit different than other rule sets such as OBR, the high school, and the NCAA. So our offensive interference then oftentimes uses time of interference for the placement of subsequent runners. Now, as I mentioned today, what we want to look at then is interference on the batter runner, specifically the runner's lane. Secondly, the on the way for the batter runner to get to first base, and we'll circle back to catcher's interference as well. So let's take a look at the runner's lane violation here rule, which we can find from 605J. And I'll go ahead and read it. And as we're reading it, we should be able to pull out that criteria so that we know what exactly we have to look for. What does the rule specifically say we have to have? And I'll give you a hint. There are 4 things that we can get from this rule that we have to have in order to be able to call a runner's lane violation. So 605J says a batter is out when, in running the last half of the distance from home to first, while the ball is being fielded to first base, the batter runner runs to the outside or to the inside, and in the umpire's judgment, doing so interferes with the fielder taking the throw at first base, except that the batter runner may run outside or inside to avoid a fielder attempting to field a batted ball. Now, again, take a look at the approved rulings. The lines marking the 3-foot line do constitute someone in that lane. And then secondly, they've got to have both feet in that running lane here. Okay, so they've got to have both feet, and the lines marking the lane then do count for being inside the running lane. Now, this is kind of a hairy rule, a lot to read into, and I think our rules instruction manual, the RIM, does a fantastic job of giving us some guidance to consider. And again, as we think about the 4 things that we have to have for runner's lane interference, we can take that from the rule and take a look at this guidance and hopefully get to those 4 things here. So continue to think as we go through these slides what exactly we have to have for runner's lane interference. First of all here, the batter runner is permitted to exit the runner lane by a step or stride. And that's kind of the final step in order to touch the base. So they can step outside of the running lane when they are in the immediate vicinity of first base for the sole purpose of touching first base. So that is the absolute last step to touch the base. That's the only time that they can have one or both feet out of the running lane. It's always interference if the catcher or pitcher's quality throw hits the batter runner and he or she is not in the lane. And then a runner, as we mentioned here, is required to have both feet in the running lane. Couple misconceptions, okay, just to make sure that we clear up. Number one, we've got to make sure here that we have to have a throw. Because if you go back to the previous slide here, this rule is specific to a fielder taking the throw. So if we do not have a throw, then we cannot have runner's lane interference. Okay, because again, this rule is specific for interfering with the fielder taking the throw at first base. So as we see here in the guidance from the rim, the ball must be thrown in order for us to go ahead and have a potential situation involving runner's lane interference. And then obviously it must be a quality throw, and our rim defines a quality throw as one that would likely have been caught had the runner not have interfered with the play. Okay? All right, so that's a lot here. Let's go ahead and back and use the chat here to kind of think about it. As I mentioned, there are 4 key things that we have to have in order to call runner's lane interference. So let's see if we can type these answers back into the chat here again. Let's see if we can get these 4. What are 4 things then from those last 2 slides on 605J? What do we absolutely have to have in order to be able to call runner's lane interference? Go ahead and type those into the chat.
I've got the first one down. Thrown ball is in there.
Absolutely. Okay, so thrown ball is absolutely one thing that we must have for runner's lane interference.
Quality throw is in there.
Yep.
George says the runner not in the lane.
And remember, how many feet does he have to have in the lane?
Oops. Runner with both feet in the lane. There's your clarification there. Good job, guys.
Good. Both feet in the lane. And then if we're talking about the lane technically also has to be written down, or has to be marked down. So here are the 4 things. You guys did a great job.
You know what you're doing up there? All right.
Here, we did a great job going through each of these here. So
Nope.
you have to have
That's a good look.
lane, number 1. And then secondly here, we've also got to have a few other things.
Brought that lift out. Do what? I'm sure it will. You should have brought that lift out.
Mute yourself.
Somebody mute him.
Hey, Don, you need to mute yourself.
All right, good. All right, so we had 4 things then that we went ahead and went through for runner's lane interference. A marked runner's lane, because that's our long end of the stick, so to speak. You guys mentioned a throw coming from behind or a quality throw. We definitely have to have that throw. So good job there with 2 feet in the runner's lane. Okay, and that makes sense here for us to go ahead and take a look at. Good job there. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look then at some clips and some examples. Some of these will be easier than others, as always. So let me go ahead and get this all up here for us. And again, 605J is what we're looking for here. Now, again, a couple things here to revert back to what we've talked about in terms of our focal points. Remember, one of those focal points is really getting good at our habits and fundamentals. And as you see here, and as you will see, to get runner's lane interference properly called, oftentimes this requires us to take the mask off with the left hand, clear the catcher, and at least get belt buckle on and up the line here too. So that's our fundamental, I guess you could say, of the day, as well as proper use of eyes, which we've always kind of talked about and already talked about here today. So let's take a look at our first clip. It is a little fuzzy to start, and then it clears up. So give me a second here to get the video cleared up. Very interesting play, and you get the gist of the situation here with multiple runners. They would have started at first and second to begin the play. So here we go. Okay, if you think about the 4 fundamentals that we have to have, number 1, a runner's lane, which is marked. Secondly, we have to have a throw coming from behind the fielder. It's got to be a quality throw, and the runner has to have at least 1 foot out of the runner's lane. Okay, and I think we check all of those boxes here as we take a look at this clip. Then as you see here, interference occurs right there on the ability of this fielder to receive that throw. So we do have a throw. It is a quality throw. The lane's down. And as you kind of saw here, the runner's feet, both of them are outside the runner's lane. So this one very easily can be called runner's lane interference. Now again, highlight the fundamentals here. On and up the line, so we got to clear the catcher and the batter runner up the base. And then as we mentioned here last week, remember, anytime that you have interference in these close, exciting situations, use the middle of the diamond to draw the spotlight on you. So yes, the fundamental of taking the mask off with the left hand, proper use of eyes, trailing the batter runner up and out and up the line is all important here too. But so too is getting in to be able to kill the play and then obviously be seen to make the call. And this umpire does a great job here as well. Now, as I mentioned, we started this clip with runners at first and second. So remember here that interference for Little League is a time of interference penalty. So if those runners, R1 and R2, had not reached their next base, then obviously they would go back to the last legally acquired at the time of interference. So make sure that we have those distinctions down. Any questions here so far, DJ, or anybody else here as we've seen our first example?
Yeah, Eric brings up a point that if the runner's lane isn't drawn, are we still going to not call it? Especially if we're talking if they're running on the inside of the fair foul line there.
A great question there. I think Little League's guidance is to have a runner's lane, but at the same time, one of those markers of the runner's lane is the foul line. So I would say if you have somebody inside that foul line, absolutely you can get that one. That's not taking the short end of the stick. But obviously, if it is on the other side to the right of that foul line and it's not marked, I wouldn't necessarily bite that one off unless it is clearly obvious. But absolutely, if he's in fair territory in that case, because that fair line marks the inside of the running lane, I do think that we can go ahead and call interference there, even if we don't have the complete runner's lane down. Good question.
The other thing I want to bring up there, Stu, on that is remember that the runner's lane starts halfway down the baseline. So if you don't have that anything marking where that halfway point is, the closer that batter runner is to you at the plate, the harder it is to sell that running lane violation. So I gave this guidance to my guys that if it's clearly and obviously a runner's lane interference, and you can tell that without having the runner's lane, I don't see an issue with calling it. But just remember, you have to be totally sure that everyone and their mother knows that it's a running lane violation if you don't have one marked. Because without having one marked, it's like Stu said, you're potentially taking the short end of the stick, and you could have an issue. So just be careful on it.
Good points. Move on to the next clip here. Another kind of obvious one here, I think, for us to take a look at. So the ball's batted, put in front of the plate. Take a look at the status of the runner as he is running to first base. Throw from behind, both feet outside the runner's lane, and interferes with the fielder's ability to make a play. Okay? So do we have enough in this clip to call runner's lane interference? Okay, a couple keys to go ahead and point out. I think this is runner's lane interference. Again, trailing the batter runner up the first base line. Good job here by our plate umpire. Can probably get past the catcher even a little bit more, so he doesn't have to worry about that obstructing his view. Eyes are where they need to be. He's got fair foul, although he's got to get those back up to the runner here now too. And then I want to highlight the job of U1 here as well. If you remember, this is a multi-member crew because this one comes to us from a regional. And our goal here is obviously to get a 90-degree angle with the throw. So that typically takes us as U1 in a position that's closer to the baseline, not necessarily always in the baseline, but closer into the baseline. So if you think about this angled distance box, this imaginary box that goes from the 30-foot line here to the mound and back, if it's fielded inside of that, our 90-degree angle is going to be closer to the baseline between first and second base. And our field umpire does a really good job here, or U1 does, to get set there. Similarly here, the reason why I think that is so important as we see the replay come about is once this ball goes through, say we did not have runner's lane interference here, this would allow him to, as you see him do it, U1, pivot without being in the way of any subsequent action either, and still be in the vicinity of first base to have a good play on any, or good position for any play subsequent on this runner at first base. Now, at the end of the day, runner's lane interference belongs to which umpire, the plate umpire or the base umpire here?
Plate umpire.
Yeah, it's most likely going to be the plate umpire. That's why we come out, we trail the batter runner, get head and eyes up, and for the most part, it will always be from the plate umpire. And we kill it right then and there, and then runners would return back to their base that they would have acquired at the time of interference. All right, next couple are a little bit harder. So we'll go ahead. I think we've got the idea and what we're looking for. Remember those four things: a marked running lane, both feet outside the runner's lane, a throw, and a quality throw here. So let's take a look at this, kind of open the door for conversation based upon those principles. So here we have a bunt attempt. Take a look at the status of this runner, and then take a look at the throw. Okay, I'll run it back here and let you see it. What are our thoughts here on this play? Runner's lane interference, yes or no?
It's definitely runner's lane interference.
Why so, Tony?
He's actually got both feet in fair territory. It's a quality throw, and therefore he hindered the fielder's ability to make a play on the thrown ball.
Good breakdown there. Anybody disagree with Tony?
I got him possibly being safe before the interference.
Okay, so Kyle, you're saying here that he would have beat the throw?
It's very close. I mean, look at this foot coming down and that ball coming through there, and there's no contact yet.
Yep.
Especially from the angle that umpire is standing. I don't know that he would clearly see that, though.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, I think you raise a very good point, because if this runner is just going to be safe, like if he had already hit the base, then he cannot interfere with the throw. So I think that is a very good point for us to put out there too. Obviously, the runner has ran the duration of the running lane outside of it, so we're not going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I do want to take a look at this throw, because this throw, and this crew actually that was working here, basically thought, and I think that we're a little bit hindered based upon the video angle, the camera angle here. They basically thought that the camera angle made this interference look much closer than what it actually was. And rather, they thought that the first baseman just whiffed on it rather than having to try and catch it through the runner. Okay, so many people thought here that he did not interfere in this case with the fielder's receiving of the throw, because the throw wasn't close enough essentially to the runner, if that makes sense. In which case, again, that's judgment. Okay, that is judgment then too, and you would not have runner's lane interference as well. But again, to Tony's point here, if you check off those boxes, both feet are outside, throw from behind, it is a quality throw, and if you think that throw was basically that the fielder would have received that throw cleanly without the runner being outside the lane, then you can obviously go ahead and grab interference here. I heard
you could also, it also seems like, Stu, that prior to making that last step with his right foot where he is right now, he was further to the left, which makes it appear that he was hindering that throw.
Yep.
Right. And in the path of the vision of the first baseman, which could be the reason why he ended up whiffing on it.
Yep, absolutely.
So here's a question for you, Stu. That last frame you have right there, he looks like he's actually reestablished on top of the first base line, which would make him legal, since his only foot that's touching the ground right now is legal, and he's not in the way of the first baseman trying to field a throw.
Yep.
He was earlier, but he isn't now.
Good point here.
So can I make? I think I can make a devil's advocate case.
Yes.
For him being legal and this not being interference.
Yes, and what I will say to that is that our rule book is specific to having both feet in the running lane. So if you take a look right now, his left foot is outside the running lane. His right foot now is in the running lane. So technically that left foot, he is still not yet, even though his right foot hit that line, 2 feet have not been established inside the running lane. So from the guidance from the rim, I would say that he did not successfully reestablish himself because he only got his right foot down on the line. Does that make sense?
Possibly contact there at the glove.
Yeah, if there's contact, then you absolutely,
Yeah, and Stu, I want to compound what you just brought out from the rule book. Not only does it say you have to have both feet in the running lane, you have to have both feet entirely in the running lane. Meaning that if you have a foot that is half over the line and half inside, if that makes sense, where I'm trying to get at, you're technically by rule not in the lane. So that it's hard for me to see because I'm on my phone here, but on that right foot, it looked to me like his right foot there was kind of half in, half out. And so by definition, he's not in the running lane based on that foot, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Dude, wasn't there, because I could only listen earlier, wasn't there a part of it that said if you were in your last step to the base, you're, then you could be in that, I guess, is in looking at the frame right there, is that his lunge, which would be his last step, where then he could be outside the lane? Is his left foot then go from that point to the base where he is lunging?
Yep, and I've got
where
another
that would be that last step?
Yeah, I've got another clip lined up next, Rob, that I think will provide some more guidance to that one because it's actually kind of the reverse angle of this one here. But to your point here, so he gets one step, and again, because he's never established himself back into the running lane, we're not going to give him the benefit of the doubt to be able to go back into fair territory and touch the base. Does that make sense?
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, it does. Thanks.
So yeah, that's a great question. Great point.
To be legal, you have to enter at the 45. You can't enter past the 45.
Yes, you can.
You have to run the last 45 in the runner's lane to be legal.
Correct.
So entering past the 45 does not give you the benefit.
But you can reestablish yourself as legal in that. So
he never got into the lane to begin with.
Right. So what I'm saying is that because he never gets in the lane, we're not going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But at the same time, he doesn't always have to run the entire distance of the running lane, if that makes sense. Like he can get back in the running lane. I'll show you a clip here. I got a good one here coming up.
So Stu,
he could run 50 feet of the 60 in illegally, and as long as he's in that last 10 feet where he's not interfering,
no,
he's
that's
legal.
not what the rule says, guys. The rule says you must run the last half in the runner's lane to be protected.
It only gives us that distance. It doesn't say he has to enter the running lane. It only says that we can use the last half. That's our measuring stick, if that makes sense. He does not, nowhere in there does it say, hey, he has to enter the runner's lane. That is just kind of like a mile marker so that we have a point by which he has to, eventually get legal.
Yeah, the terminology there is in running the last half distance from home base to first base. It's essentially saying the 45-foot line or the 30-foot line. It doesn't say that they have to run the entire distance. It's saying in running the last half of the distance. So I see where you're coming from, Matt. It's a little tricky on the grammar there. But that's just more, as Stu said, it's more of a demarcation thing, letting us know that in the last half, they have to be running to first base.
Another clip here coming up, and I'm not skipping over that because these next couple clips, Matt, to your point, will help us get some more clarification on that point too. So I'm not trying to push us ahead either. It's easier to talk through some of the film with those examples. So again, here, this runner is on the line the entire time. Hayward is. And then his last step, as you kind of see right there, was outside the runner's lane. Okay, and they'd slow it down pretty good here for us, so I'm going to let this one roll. And again, he's legal all the way through here because he's on the line or at least in the box. You can see his steps right here. And then watch his left foot. So this one is inside. Okay, so now he does not have both feet in the running lane. And we are going to give that right foot an opportunity to get to the base. But again, because his last step before that final stride to the base is out, and this one actually went to replay. You can see how close it was. They ruled this one as an out for interference. This would have been runner's lane interference.
So I think the key here, right, is it wasn't his last two. It was his last two steps where he went out, not his last step.
Yep. And remember, that's for the sole purpose of touching the base. His left foot stepping out of here is not for the sole purpose of touching first base, right? He's just running with that left foot. Now, this right stride would be for the purpose of touching first base. So he would be protected with that right stride.
Yeah, and remember, guys, it's where they are either in or out of the running lane at the moment that the potential infraction occurs, right? So even though he's good for literally every step, the issue is with the step that is not good, that's when the infraction occurs. That's why we've got interference on this, in my opinion.
Yep. Good one.
Stu, I'd like to share the tidbit that you, Seth, and I were discussing earlier this week. 99% of legality doesn't make up for 1% of illegality, and 1% of legality doesn't make up for 99% of illegality, if that makes sense.
One more runner's lane clip here, and that'll be the last one we'll show because I can combine batter runner interference with runner's interference next week too. So you can see here, I think we get the point here. And one more here on the reversal angle, or at least the different idea. So here's the last clip here for us to go ahead and talk through the runner's lane interference clip. All right. So we've got a that's nothing here coming out of the box to make sure that everyone knew that there was nothing to worry about there and everybody was clean. But as we take a look here at the status of the runner, remember our conversation here is on batter runner interference. Okay. You can see here that he would arguably have, and the film quality isn't as great as the other one, so I get that one. But let's say for the sake of argument, he got himself back into the lane here in this run. Okay, so let's say he's back in the lane like right now. Okay. And you can see here that this throw tails, and then we ultimately have a situation. Here's another look at it. See what you guys are thinking here. Yes or no here?
It's really tough to see if he reestablished himself in there or not because of the choppiness of the video. So I think this is a real tough one. If he did establish himself in there, I would have nothing.
Good.
Can we get the other side view again?
Yeah, and I think that your point there is really important there, Tony. Is like just if he's reestablished himself.
And prior to the throw.
Yeah.
Right.
And I want to say that he was probably at least on the line. But again, I put this clip in here because we can see he definitely gets back into the box and definitely gets both feet into the lane at the time of interference. So I think some misconceptions were definitely kind of re-clarified here. Remember, he does not have to run the entire duration of the running lane. It is just a mark of demarcation that by then, if there's interference and he's not in the running lane, then you could potentially then call him out for the runner's lane violation. So there's a way to get legal. There's obviously a way to get illegal here with the running lane too. But again, those four major concepts for us to make sure that we see: a throw from behind the fielder, a quality throw, both feet outside the running lane, and obviously then a runner's lane that's marked there too. Any other comments or questions here on this clip or anything else here pertaining to runner's lane interference?
Mike Marceau just said that he was just essentially asking a question. He was saying timing of interference is critical. And it was, I just replied, yeah, timing is huge. We've talked at length all week about this rule, but this is an incredibly particular rule. And as we've talked about today, there are a lot of different things in play when this rule needs to happen and we need to call it. So timing, paying attention, it's definitely huge to make sure we get it right.
Yeah, just to highlight the fundamentals here once again here of our umpire. I think this one does a great job here. Take a look at our plate umpire. Ball's in play. Great use of eyes here by him. So let's highlight the work he does because he picks up on a couple different things here. And he actually does call the runner out for interference here. And in retrospect, probably shouldn't have because he got back in the lane. As we saw, it was really close. So I think I could buy either argument here. But great job here by the plate umpire of some basic fundamentals. And this is one of our focal points here for 2021. Mask is off with the left hand, trails the batter runner, clears him up the first base line, gets good distance, proper use of eyes, says no, that's nothing. Get his eyes, though, back on the runner here. You can see that his eyes right here, you don't necessarily need to be on the baseball here. You can kind of see that one out of your peripheral in fair foul. Now get your eyes back on the runner, and he probably picks up the runner late, or at least in his peripheral, which convinced him then that the runner was actually outside the runner's lane at the time of interference. And as we see here, he kind of got the runner gets back into the runner's lane. We protect his step or stride and probably don't need to call interference. But nonetheless, if I had the back end of this one, this umpire actually calls time. He drifts into the infield, and he is able to kill everything because you've got subsequent action. And just as we started in the first clip, remember that when you have something this close, this exciting, you're going to want to come out and kill it and take that spotlight. And remember, that spotlight then is in the middle of the diamond. Any other questions here or anything like that over runner's lane interference here today? Anything at all there? All right, DJ's going to link in the chat here one more time. I've got some situations that I think 3 of them go to the runner's lane, which are really interesting to take a look at, and then another 3 of them do have to deal with the batter runner, and catcher's interference. So remember, there were 6 questions from last week that are out there. There are 6 more here from this week, all about interference with the batter runner. He'll link those in the chat here for you too, so that you can have those and work on those as well. My goal is to get, I do have answer keys done, but I would rather do it as a collaborative effort from people in other regions so that I'm not, the only one giving answers here. I don't want to necessarily be that guy, so to speak. But nonetheless, here we'll have those answer keys and talk through those discussions here as we go on, and as we clean up interference, we'll get those definitely out to you. Other than that, that is all I've got here for us in our episode today of 3 Up, 3 Down. We'll be back same time, same place next week for batter runner and runner interference. We'll take a look more so at Rule 7 and interference on the runner here. But today's conversation largely focused then on runner's lane interference. To go ahead and close the door then on interference on the runner as we continue to move through season 4 of runner's lane interference. Of interference in general. Remember those announcements. You got a bunch of resources linked in the chat. Use those if you need them. And then obviously continue to think about what exactly you want to get better at as everyone then starts back on the diamond here in 2021. Everyone, thanks for being here. Thanks for your participation, your engagement. I appreciate you all and looking forward then to continuing on with things next week. Guys, have a great weekend and I'll see everybody next Friday.